I am Nayan Chanda, editor of YaleGlobal Online. As it turns out, I am in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Tom Friedman, the author of Hot, Flat, and Crowded, actually is in our studio at Yale. So I'm going to ask Tom some questions about his book. Tom, welcome to Yale.
Nayan, it's great to be back here with Yale Global.
Thank you, Tom. Since your last trip to our studios, you have produced another book, Hot, Flat, and Crowded, Why We Need a Green Revolution and How It Can Renew America. It's a most timely book. And what struck me is, though, that you wrote World is Flat as a cool, recent analysis of how globalization has flattened and shrunk the planet. Your current book is a cri de coeur. It's a really very strong emotional appeal to the world to save itself. Now, what has made you so emotional?
Well, Nayan, it just, it's part of an evolution. It's not like people haven't been emotional on this subject before I have, long before, whether, going back to Silent Spring. So I hardly discovered climate change or biodiversity loss. I certainly didn't discover energy poverty. I didn't discover petrodictatorship. I didn't discover energy, natural resource supply and demand. What I've done in this book, I hope, is maybe brought them all together and tried to show people how they're all one problem and have one solution. And I think that's my value add. And to do it in a way that is passionate, because you can't be a parent today and not be passionate about the world that we're creating and abusing at the same time.
Yeah, I think what also struck me in this book is that you have your earlier book, World is Flat, was somewhat celebratory of globalization, that how it has removed poverty and shrunk the world. But in this current book, your mood is distinctly gloomy. You say, in fact, I quote you, the impact of globalization is metastasizing to cause what is being called the world's sixth great mass extinction. Now, perhaps you can explain to our viewers how this mass extinction is happening because of climate change.
Well, the extinction phase,
why should an average citizen care about it?
The extinction phase that we're in right now, it's a loss of biodiversity, plant and animal species, is happening for a number of reasons. One has to do with climate change, but that's actually not the most important. The most important is simply development. The fact that we're plowing up more and more of the world's tropical forests, despoiling more and more of the world's great fisheries, polluting more and more of the world's great rivers and lakes. And the combination of that with then climate change is putting enormous stress on the world's incredible bounty of plant and animal biodiversity. And we are now in the phase of a real biodiversity mass extinction. We're, according to Conservation International, losing one new species every 20 minutes. Species lost today is 1,000 times the norm of 50 years ago. Well, if anything, today we're 1,000 times the norm. If it were rainfall, 1,000 times the norm, or spread of HIV/AIDS, 1,000 times the norm, we would sit up and that would be front page news. But we don't talk about this. And when we lose these incredible plant and animal species, we don't only lose parts of nature and its natural beauty that inspire poets and artists and make life worth living. But at the same time, we lose that incredible knowledge and wisdom of nature in creating some of these things. And we have no idea what cures, natural cures for disease, are being lost in this extinction phase.
Your description of what you saw in the Amazon rainforest was really very, very moving. And this is, in fact, one of the great merit of this book, that you have a very vivid description of what's happening to this earth. Now, you have coined a new phrase, energy climate era. Now, what differentiates this from what we had before, and when does it actually begin?
Well, basically what I'm arguing is that the energy sources that powered the Industrial Revolution, we thought were going to be permanently inexhaustible, inexpensive, and benign. What we have discovered as we've entered what I call the energy climate era, around the time of the millennium, is that these energy sources that have powered our growth since 1750, since the Industrial Revolution, oil, coal, gas, are exhaustible, expensive, and toxic. Toxic for the climate, toxic for the air we breathe, toxic geopolitically because of the kinds of regimes they empower. And so to me, the boundary line between the previous era and the energy climate era, or between, say, the common era and the energy climate era, is this crossing of a line where the very fuels that power our growth go from inexpensive, inexhaustible, and benign to expensive, exhaustible, and toxic. And I think that is a fundamental shift, and as a purely heuristic device, I like to call this new era the energy climate era, because I think issues related to energy, its price, availability, and impact on the world, and the climate are really going to shape more politics than any other factors as we move deeper into the 21st century.
Yeah. Tom, you have also said in your book that it is perhaps better for America to create green jobs rather than bemoan the disappearance of blue-collar jobs to China, India, and elsewhere. Now, what would it take to create these green jobs?
Well, some very actually simple and relatively low-cost initiatives, Nayan. Let's start with green-collar jobs. Well, if you change the building codes in cities and make it really economically advantageous to put up solar panels on your roof because the local utility will have to buy that solar power from you, or you change the code around insulation, how a home has to be insulated at any given time, at what level, and you'll create a huge demand for home insulators and solar panel installers. Those are blue-collar jobs that I would call green-collar jobs. And I think you're going to see more and more of those kind of jobs. Building a wind turbine, installing a wind turbine, that's a big manufacturing, formerly blue-collar, now green-collar job. So that's really what I'm focusing on at that end. At the high end, of course, there's more and more need for the scientists who can design those solar panels and drive their progress forward so they become more and more efficient. There's going to be a huge demand for middle kind of white-collar jobs that will also be green-collar jobs to come in and help design or implement energy efficiency in your own home. So all those, I think, will fall into the category of green-collar jobs.
So the rescue package that the Congress passed had actually restored the tax credit for renewable energy industry. Now, that was, of course, a positive thing. But the crisis, it seems to me, is going to make it more difficult for people to argue for using alternate energy. What do you think is likely to happen?
Well, as David Rothkopf, energy consultant, says, will this financial crisis be the end of green, or could green possibly be the end of the financial crisis? I think that's a very, very important question. Right now, I'm extremely worried. I'm worried that the falling price of oil will reduce consumer demand for energy efficient products and better mileage cars, and at the same time will reduce the willingness of venture capitalists to take risks on more expensive renewable fuel, knowing that it's going to be harder for them to compete in a marketplace of $2 a gallon gasoline as opposed to $4 a gallon gasoline.
Yeah, that problem actually is perhaps little less clear in places like China. You have been to China since you wrote the book. You have been there many times before. What did you find in your last trip to China about what the Chinese are planning to do about alternative energy source?
Well, I think China is really ambivalent. Now, on the one hand, their growth needs are so overwhelming, and coal is so overwhelmingly cheap and available to China, both through domestic and foreign sources, that they're going to continue building coal-fired power plants. At the same time, they understand for their own needs and in response to the world's pressure, they're going to have to move in time to a cleaner energy system. Right now, Nayan, the Chinese are on the fence. They're sitting there kind of waiting for us. They're basically saying, well, if the Americans don't move, why should we move? And we're saying, well, if the Chinese don't move, we won't move. And we have to break out of that. We, America, I think, have to take the lead. I think if we take the lead, China will follow. But I don't think China will lead this, because the inertia for China, which is to just keep sort of digging up coal and burning it for electricity, is going to be just enormous.
Yeah, I think that's the similar attitude I seem to see in India too. I think Indians are also heavily reliant on coal, and they're saying that if you give us clean coal technology, fine, but otherwise we simply have to produce electricity and we are going to go coal. So that's the danger we have as we see the increasing challenge from climate change. What do you think the Indians could do or should do?
Well, you know, what I say to young Chinese, and in some ways could apply to young Indians, although they on a per capita basis produce much lower CO2 emissions, is that what I say to young Chinese is every time I come to China, young Chinese say to me, Mr. Friedman, you got to grow dirty for 150 years. Now it's our turn. And to which I say, I know how you feel. I understand how you feel. We ate the entree, we ate the dessert, we ate the hors d'oeuvre, and then we came to you and said, here's some tea, let's split the bill. Well, that's not on. People think that's really, really unfair, and I understand that. And so what I say to young Chinese is that you're absolutely right. We got to grow dirty for 150 years. Now it's your turn. Take your time. Take your time. Grow as dirty as you want. Because I think my country just needs 5 years to invent all the clean power technologies you, China, are going to need before you choke to death. And we're going to come over here and we're going to sell them all to you. And we're going to clean your clock. We're going to clean your clock in the next great global industry. And that's when I see them adjusting the headsets from the interpreter, saying, what did he just say? And so my point simply to young Chinese is, I understand you think it's unfair that you should now not be able to burn coal if we did for 200 years. I understand that. But you got two choices. One is you have to understand when we started burning coal, we didn't know it had the climate effects that it was having, basically. And number two, and you do know, China today. But number two, this is going to be the next great global industry, what I call ET, energy technology. All the clean power technologies to substitute for coal and oil. And some country in the world is going to lead and dominate that industry. I want it to be the United States. I think we get there first if we have a price signal. China will want it to be China, but I want to get there first.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, you also have written in your book about the consumer volcano erupting in societies which had their consumer demand suppressed for many years. And so how do you tell these people who want to enjoy what the Western world has enjoyed for so long, the knowledge that this volcano of consumption is going to make life even much more difficult and dangerous in terms of climate change?
See, I don't think you can tell them, Nayan. And I think what you can do is put everything we have into inventing the clean alternatives, and taking the lead and then selling them in India and China, or manufacturing them there, so we get down to the Chindia price, the price at which they could scale in China and India. Our job is to pay the big front upfront cost because, frankly, we've put the most into the atmosphere, the most CO2, and we have the most resources, or we did before the financial meltdown, to start inventing the alternatives. We have to make the upfront costs, and they have to provide the manufacturing platforms to get those upfront costs down so these start to scale quickly in India and China.
Yeah, so I think the one message that is very strong in your book is that here is an opportunity for the United States to reclaim its leadership in this area, which is going to be a determining sort of event on determining technology for the fate of the earth. How do you think that the coming election and the new president would give the United States an opportunity to really sort of make a clean break with the past, and perhaps even reinstall the solar panel which was removed ceremonially by Ronald Reagan from the White House?
Well, it's an important question. I think the next president can, and not only can, must lead the ET revolution. Because, you know, Nayan, in a world that's hot, flat, and crowded, one thing I know for sure is that ET energy technology is going to be the next great global industry. I know that as surely as I'm sitting here in this interview with you. What I don't know is who's going to lead that industry. Is it going to be India? Is it going to be China? Is it going to be Japan? Is it going to be America? Is it going to be Russia, South America? I don't know that. My argument is that the country that leads this ET industry must be the United States of America. Why? Because if, as Jeff Immelt of GE says, if you want to be big, you've got to be big in big things. If you want to be big, you have to be big in big things. If we want to be a big power, then we have to be big in the biggest thing, and that is energy technology, ET. And the country that owns ET is going to have the most, I think, national security, economic security, ecological security, healthy population, competitive industries, and global respect. That country must be the United States of America. Otherwise, our children will not enjoy our standard of living.
Tom, again, it's a great pleasure to have you at your studio at Yale.
Nayan, thank you very much. It's a treat to be back here with Yale Global.